Good evening, everyone, and welcome back after what I sincerely hope was a wonderful Christmas holiday for everyone, even though it felt much more like early spring temperature-wise. Well, we're going to pay for that this week as we've got a changing forecast. It's got a lot of cold moving in, and it will feel much more like the holidays than what maybe the holidays felt. Some mild temperatures, some folks wearing shorts, taking to the Dawkins Trail, getting out and enjoying a bit of the extended holiday weekend. And it was very unusual, but I think very welcome at the same time. Since coming in and sitting down at the desk early this morning, it's been one complete day of makeup, and we'll be trying to get caught up on a lot of calls, emergency things that have happened since I spoke to you last. A large portion of today has been spent trying to find out the details about services to be held in honor of former mayor of Sagersville, Tim Bostic, who passed away at his home last night. I'll tell you what I know on that front, and many others before I leave you for this Monday, the 29th day of December. As now the next countdown is on until the end of 2014 and the beginning of what we hope will be a very bright new year for everyone. A whole lot of news, a whole lot of reports, a new week, a new calendar, and much more. We'll begin this evening with just a couple of things before we get into several calls of emergency. I received word over the holiday break that the Kentucky Department of Transportation has recently awarded contracts totaling more than $38 million for 8 highway projects within the Kentucky Department of Highways District 10, which covers much of the viewing area. Contracts awarded as part of the September, October, and December, it says, 2014 letting are one, a more than $19 million, nearly $19.5 million project, which will go to widen 2 miles of the Mountain Parkway here in McGoffin County and construct a new exit at Gifford Road. Construction is to be completed within 420 working days once the work begins. Also, almost $1.7 million project to resurface and make drainage improvements on about 5.5 miles of Kentucky 1635 here in McGoffin County. That construction is to be completed by the 30th of June. And lastly, in the viewing area, nearly $12 million for a project to improve the alignment of Kentucky 172, that's between mile markers 5 and 8, and reconstruct Kentucky 172 between mile markers 2 and 5 in Morgan County. Now that construction is to be completed within 360 days once the work begins. So another hit for the coal industry. There's been a few signs of life, sporadic and minor, over the past several weeks, but this one goes in the other direction. Nearly 700 jobs are affected, this time in the western part of the state, but nevertheless, we know that Patriot Coal Corporation is going to idle operations at the Highland No. 9 mine and Dodge Hill No. 1 mine in Union County. Altogether, those mines employ about 670 men and women. They also produced nearly 4 million tons of thermal coal last year. A spokesperson for the company has gone on record as saying that the mines are shutting down due to difficult coal markets that continue. They also say sales were lower last year at the Highland mine. Now, they're also holding out hopes that this will be an idling situation and not go from an idle at both locations to a closure at both locations, even though 670 workers did start to receive their calls over the course of the holiday weekend. A great deal of auto accidents to try to cover this evening. Several fatal across Kentucky and in the eastern part of our state as well. I'll try to go through these in as much chronological order as possible. We do have some photographs, some video attached to some of these reports. We'll go back to this past Friday when Kentucky State Police from the Morehead Post 8 say that the Wolfe County 911 dispatcher requested assistance with a single vehicle fatality on the Mountain Parkway. Now, upon their arrival, they found that a Linda Ring 66 of Sassafras had been operating a 2012 Chevy Malibu eastbound on the Mountain Parkway near the 38-mile marker. When she lost control of the vehicle, it ran off the roadway rather, struck a hillside, and then overturned a passenger in Miss Ring's vehicle. Miss Ring's son, Mr. James L. Sherrow, 42 of Sassafras, was ejected during that crash and pronounced dead at the scene. Miss Ring was taken to the UK Medical Center with non-life-threatening injuries. That's not the only fatality that we'll talk about on the Mountain Parkway. A double fatality accident near the 8-mile marker earlier today, right around 2:30 or so, after a passenger car and an ambulance collided. I'll get to that report in just a second. However, we know that a Hi-Hat woman from Floyd County has died after a wreck yesterday afternoon. According to the Kentucky State Police, 68-year-old Jane Gross was traveling east on Route 122 in McDowell when an oncoming vehicle lost control on the wet road and struck her vehicle head-on. She was taken to the McDowell ARH Medical Center and pronounced deceased at that facility. She was not wearing her seatbelt at the time of the accident. Police do my apologies, do not suspect alcohol in playing any type of a role in that collision. And here in McGoffin County, over the course of the holiday weekend, it was a busy holiday weekend for emergency personnel. Local fire and rescue and EMS personnel responded to not one, but several auto and emergency accidents. These are some still images from the scene of Oakley Road. This was Friday afternoon, near where you get to Booger Mountain, if you will. You can see the utility pole, which was clipped by the SUV being driven by Avenel Bailey. She ran off the road, struck the utility pole, basically drove through the utility pole on the passenger side, fortunately. The wires then dropped in an instant and then caught the rear axle of the vehicle and kept it suspended and from plunging on over the embankment. Also fortunate for Miss Bailey. It was another 10 to 15 feet over that embankment. Now, she was still inside upon arrival of emergency personnel. The electric lines were still intact and still running overhead. All lines on the ground were tested by the McGoffin County Rescue Squad using their hot stick piece of equipment, which tests lines to see if they're energized. Fortunately, an employee for Licking Valley RECC was in the area and was able to go further down from the accident site and then de-energize those lines above while they were able to extricate Miss Bailey from her vehicle and providing more safety to her as well as emergency personnel on the scene. Now, after those lines were de-energized and a wrecker was called to help stabilize the vehicle to keep it from going on over the embankment, rescue personnel used their equipment to cut back the roof of the vehicle and remove the windshield. And at that point, they were able to, rather considering the predicament, easily, to some degree, not maybe the best of words to use, but remove Bailey from the vehicle, after which she was evaluated on scene and actually refused medical treatment on scene and was taken from the scene by a family member. They were able to further work to get the vehicle free from, and you can see just how little there was holding this vehicle in place. Telephone and television lines, cable and telephone lines, were all that were keeping the vehicle from going on over the embankment after she clipped that telephone pole or utility pole basically off at the ground. And then a little later on Friday afternoon, the Middle Fork Volunteer Fire Department and the McGoffin County Rescue Squad received notice from 911 in McGoffin County of a missing 8-year-old in the Crane's Nest area of McGoffin County. Crane's Nest is a hollow that sits off of Craft Creek, which sits off of Route 30 in McGoffin County, a rather remote part of the county, if you will. Both of those departments responded, hoping to beat the night cold, which was starting to set in and possibly complicate and make situations much more dangerous. A Metcalfe County couple, from what I understand, was in the area tearing down an old abandoned building. Along with them was their 8-year-old son. The family, I believe at least mother and son, had walked up the creek towards the head of Crane's Nest and at some point became separated.
They were walking back down and she thought she'd stay in the roadway and he wanted to walk down the creek bed to the house that was being torn down. About 5, she said maybe 10 minutes after they got down, she noticed he wasn't there. And so they started searching. Actually, they started searching about 2 o'clock, so it was over 2 hours before we got the call. And during this time, 2 hours is a long time for a person to wander. So we got to the scene, got our teams together, our areas to be searched, and as one of our teams went into the left fork, they found some small prints and tracked it almost to the top of the hill on the 30 ridge. And about that time, 911 received a call from the guard shack up Tip Top that one of the workers going to work at the U.S. coal job had picked up the child and taken him to the guard shack, and he was safe and sound. So some of the members from the Middle Fork Fire Department went on around the ridge to the guard shack, and we took the family up to the top of the hill on the strip job and waited for them to come, and he was reunited with his mother and father. A little bit embarrassed, but overall good shape, and he was just glad to be back home, and his parents were really thrilled with the situation.
Reiterate just a bit as to what Connolly said. The boy's father, Hubert Lattin, was extremely grateful to all emergency personnel who responded on a volunteer basis to help find their son, and it was a situation that came out as well as anyone could have hoped for. But that wasn't the end of emergency calls over the course of the weekend. We'll now go to Sunday morning right around 9:30. The scene of this incident is actually two separate auto accidents. No major injuries, but another incident involving downed power lines. Sunday morning around 9:30, 84-year-old Richard Smithers was traveling in his '08 Silverado. He lost control of the vehicle in a curve and then went over this knoll, as you see here, struck guide wires, which in turn pulled off some upper-level utility lines, not electric, but utility lines onto the roadway. Now, he was picked up by a member of his family and taken, we believe, home and refused medical treatment on the scene. The second vehicle, the small black passenger car that you saw, actually came up on the accident, saw the lines down, and then swerved into the ditch line to avoid colliding with them in fear that they may be energized electrical lines. This was the scene of an accident on the Mountain Parkway just inside Morgan County, across the Morgan-Magoffin County line. This was Christmas morning around 9:30 a.m. The Magoffin County Rescue Squad was actually called out to assist the Morgan County unit with traffic control after the driver of this vehicle lost control in a curve. Roads were a bit slick and damp. He and a female passenger were inside the Ford Explorer. When he lost control, the vehicle then went into a slide and then struck perhaps the most immovable object alongside the Mountain Parkway, that large boulder, if you will. You saw the damage done to the SUV, the personal belongings, which were strewn about from the impact, which also pretty much totaled the side of the vehicle. Both individuals were taken, I believe, to an area hospital, presuming the Morgan County Appalachian Regional Health Care Center, by ambulance personnel. We do not have an update on their condition at this time. I can only add that it was a single auto accident. And we're still awaiting details, but we have had confirmed that 2 people have died, 2 others were injured as a result of a collision on the Mountain Parkway just earlier this afternoon. It happened right around 2:30, right around the 8-mile marker. We understand that authorities in Clark County have confirmed that 2 people inside a small passenger car that collided with an ambulance were both pronounced dead on scene, believed to have died on impact. It happened on the Mountain Parkway right around 2:30. As I said, a small compact car, blue in color, reportedly was traveling westbound. It crossed the center line and then struck an ambulance which was traveling eastbound at the time. Basically, the vehicle struck in a near head-on collision. Extreme damage done to both vehicles. The 2 occupants, 2 employees in that ambulance, as I believe it was not transporting a patient at that time, were injured on scene. I also understand that one was airlifted from the scene of the accident to the UK hospital. The other was taken by ambulance to another separate medical facility. No update on their condition at this time. No words on the identity of the 2 others who were deceased, and both of which were in that passenger car, which is still, for an unknown reason, known to have crossed the center line and then struck the ambulance traveling eastbound. We'll get caught up on more news right after this. In a follow-up from not 1, but maybe even up to 3 reports that I was closely following throughout most of last week and even a bit before, there was an arrest made since I saw you last in regards to at least 1 robbery that took place in eastern Kentucky. We knew the identity of a Lawrence County man who was being sought by authorities just before I left you for the holidays. 31-year-old Chad Nichols has now been taken into custody and lodged in the Big Sandy Regional Detention Center for a robbery at the BP in Louisa several days ago. Nichols is now jailed in the Big Sandy Regional Detention Center on charges of second-degree robbery as well as being a persistent felony offender. Now, this goes back several days before the holidays when Nichols, who is from Lovely, was believed to have gone into the BP in Louisa, entered the residence, demanded, well, actually didn't demand. When the cashier opened up the register, he just took an undisclosed amount of cash and then fled. Police got a description of the getaway vehicle, identified as a blue Jeep Liberty. He didn't brandish a weapon, didn't indicate that he had one possibly, but he did flee the scene. No injuries were sustained, and he was able to have been identified throughout the investigation by Kentucky State Police and has since been jailed. The same vehicle and same description of an individual matches not just Nichols and the case of the BP in Louisa, but also in Pike County just about a day after the Louisa incident. State police say another man came into a store there, a discount tobacco mart at the fast lane, also driving a blue Jeep Liberty when he got away. Also came in, waited for the cashier to open the register, and then left with an amount of cash. I spoke with representatives, PR Trooper Stephen Mounts of Post 9 in Pike earlier today, and he could only say that Post 8 and Post 9 are aware of the similarities and are closely investigating to see if he's responsible for both counts. There's also an ongoing investigation into the robbery of this Floyd County convenience/fuel mart on Route 114 that was robbed several days ago, but around the same time frame. I'm also right now receiving word that police are on the lookout for 3 men who robbed a convenience store in Virgie over the weekend. Post 9 of Pikeville says they got a report of an armed robbery at the Virgie Double Quick. When troopers arrived, they found that 3 unknown males came into the store demanding cash. The clerk gave them an undisclosed amount of money before they fled the scene on foot in an unknown direction. Still more headlines right now. Let's find out what's happening on tonight's McGoffin Farm Bureau-sponsored community calendar. I'll tell you what's going on. Job Thomas Patrick is 15. Happy birthday to you with lots of love from Mom Misty, Larry, Haley, Dad Herman, Mamaw Kathy, Bubby Gary. Happy birthday to you. Happy 15th. And one announcement as we wind down 2014, and as you wind down any year, well, comes the paying of taxes. And I have a reminder from the city of Salyersville. The deadline for city residents to pay your property tax at face value is this Wednesday, December the 31st, day after tomorrow, by 4 p.m. at Salyersville City Hall. There will be a 10% penalty which goes on to your bills after the 31st. So you have until this Wednesday, closing at 4 on the 31st, New Year's Eve, to pay your taxes at face value in Salyersville. I haven't received any notification from the Sheriff's Department in regards to tax dates there and their hours of operation this week. We'll try to have those for you at a later time. Before we go to funeral service announcements, a quick reminder that this is how you get announcements on the program, birthdays, anniversaries, and the like, for free. And one more reminder, a reminder that you can catch this program weeknights on Howard's Cable, Foothills Broadband, as well as yournewstoday.com. Nightly programming being uploaded to our new website, which is still not under construction, but still being modified and tweaked. But on a daily basis, you can now catch Your News Today anywhere you are on yournewstoday.com. Turning to funeral service announcements, Logan Ryan Workman was laid to rest over the weekend. Services held Friday. The newborn infant survived by his father, Lonzie Wireman Workman, and mother, Vannie Peters. He's also survived by paternal grandparents, Jesse and Irvin Workman, and maternal grandparents, Gary and Alma Peters. Old Olive Preston Marshall of Sagersville was laid to rest on Saturday over the weekend. Preceded in death by her husband, Buck, she's survived by sons Logan and Brad, as well as daughters Melody Stevens and Jency Bailey, a brother Ray Preston, and sisters Mary Lou Bird and Brenda Poe. Services were held over the course of this weekend in her honor. She passed away on December the 23rd, once again at the age of 88. 51-year-old Ricky Neal Triplett was laid to rest yesterday from Mash Fork in Sagersville. He passed away on the 22nd, the son of Jimmy Triplett and Alice Farley Wicker. He was preceded in death by his son, Ricky Triplett Jr. He's left to mourn by 2 daughters, Christy Carpenter and Katie Triplett Howard. Funeral services were conducted once again yesterday in his honor. Services were held earlier today for 72-year-old Frankie Ann Lovely of Blaine, who passed away on the 26th, survived as listed as a devoted aunt to Michael Montgomery. She survived by several nieces and nephews, a brother Jimmy Lovely, and sisters Nellie Lovely, Weltha Weatherby, and Viney Wireman. Services were held earlier today in her honor. And services are to be held tomorrow for 79-year-old Betty Cole of Sagersville. She passed away Friday. Those left to mourn include her husband Lawrence, daughters Kathy Cantrell, my apologies, Linda Sue Bailey, Vicki Minix, sons Tim Cole, Mark Cole, and Curtis Cole. Services for Betty are going to be held tomorrow morning at 11 from the There Is Hope Ministries Church on Route 40. Burial will follow thereafter at the Cole Family Cemetery on Jim Arnett Branch here in Salyersville. Well, in addition to just getting the lights back on and trying to get back into the flow of things here at the office and getting caught up on a number of headlines that we've already brought you this evening, some of today was also spent, sadly, learning of the passing of former Salyersville mayor and editor of the Salyersville Independent, Tim Bostic, who passed away at his home last night. Limited details on his passing and services at this hour, and we'll have some remarks from a few individuals coming up a little later on in the week on his behalf. But for now, we do have some information about his passing as well as tentative arrangements which have been made in his honor. Well, goodness knows that anyone who knew Tim Bostic knows that there's a whole lot to be said. He had many hats that he wore, all very proud of, and he always proclaimed to be most proud of the fact of his time spent here in Salyersville. He was Salyersville's mayor from January the 1st of 78 through December the 31st of 85, serving 2 full terms, and of course maybe even more well-known, well, I don't know, but well-known, we'll say, as the editor and owner of the Salyersville Independent. He took over running the paper somewhere in the latter 60s. He bought it maybe somewhere in the early 70s and then retired from being the editor sometime around 2000. And then, of course, he coached baseball for 17 years, and, of course, that has left a great part of his legacy behind. And one of his closest friends told me today that he was always the fan of the underdog, and that might be his greatest legacy. Nevertheless, we'll talk more about him, as I think a few folks are going to be maybe wanting to go back and reminisce about their time spent with Tim. But I can tell you this, we have confirmed through the McGoffin County Funeral Home that 69-year-old Bostic, who was living in Lexington with his wife Carol, will have services held in his honor here in Salyersville and McGoffin County. They are being arranged at this time. They're waiting on the rest of the family to come in from out of state and to be announced sometime on behalf of the McGoffin County Funeral Home, and we'll have those just as soon as they are announced.
Him would make us caught. So, I'll tell you, I'm pleased I am to be here. I hate to hear that the Dixie Bridge Band is going to call it quits after this. I hate they can't do that. The Blue Mule, he played high school baseball for me. I've never had a better friend than Sam. I'm really pleased to have him here. I'll say this before I leave. I never was too shy about talking, okay? When I was elected mayor here, I had the privilege of being elected president of the Kentucky Municipal League. And I'd go around to different towns and I'd talk, and I was leaving this message. If you have doubt, any doubt at all about going to heaven, make reservations to come to Salyersville. Okay? You got it. It's the next best place, I tell you.
Tim closed out his remarks that night as we were saying goodbye to the official last performance of the Dixie Bridge Band during Community Day, as saying, I've been there and done that, and I know. He was also famously known to wrap it all up by saying, enough said. Well, your forecast short and sweet, and I'm running out of time on my first day back after Christmas. A low of 26 degrees, mostly cloudy tonight, light north-northeast wind, nothing really to speak of. We'll see tomorrow with some sunshine. We'll see mostly sunny skies tomorrow and a high of 38 degrees on your Tuesday, and I'll catch up to it in just a second. Wednesday looks to be mostly sunny and 32, and that, of course, will be New Year's Eve. And I'm pushing the wrong button trying to catch up. And then I've got a New Year's Day forecast of sunny and 36. But we'll get into that in much more detail tomorrow, as well as some follow-ups and other reports when I see you then. But for now, thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful night, and we look forward to counting down the rest of 2014 and counting to 2015 with you starting tomorrow. Good night.